When you've got a student who's starting kindergarten and they're not speaking the language and they're at a much different conversational level than a student who has been speaking the language for a long time, it can be a little scary for a teacher.
Teachers don't always realize their academic language that they're using isn't always at the level that the child actually needs.
Some of my students that kind of present or look like they know exactly what's going on, they really lack some of the underlying vocabulary that would really boost their skills.
By the time they reached classes of my own in upper high school, it was generally assumed that you as a learner have had your needs served one way or another by this point.
The population is growing in Rhode Island, so I think it's really important for teachers to know more about these students and how we can best service these students, and ultimately best service all of our students.
There's a predictable structure of each credential, kind of analyzing, engaging in professional learning, developing a plan of how you're going to transfer this learning into your own classroom, implementing the plan, and then reflection.
If you have some background, there's something there for you. If you have very little background on the topic, there's definitely some beginning pieces that allow you to develop, your ability to really be reflective of your practice. And that reflection piece has been extremely valuable for me in terms of how I do things differently at times or how I will be doing things differently next year.
In a profession like teaching, you are doing so much creation. There's often very little time to process. What I appreciate about these micro-credentials is it gives that pause for you to think and reflect on what you're doing every day in the classroom, and then implement it immediately after.
I just finished the language acquisition one, which was the one that I was saying that really made me stop and think about how I'm using language and the directions that I'm giving. Am I getting too wordy? Am I talking too much?
The second language acquisition gave me a really good background as to where students are on the spectrum of acquiring English as a second language, and as well as giving them the tools that can help them along the way. Reinforcing vocabulary, using graphic organizers, using different tools in the classroom so that they can access the content, never watering down what we're doing, but just making it so that they can access what we're learning in class.
I used what I learned throughout the micro-credential in the classroom with the kids. They were making a binder where any new word they were introduced to, we would define it based on what Google said. We would define it then in our own words so that we can remember it better. And then we would find a picture that goes with our definition so that the picture can pop in our head whenever the word comes up to help lead us to that. And that was something that I learned through the micro-credential as a way to reach ELs, but I found that it also reaches my special ed population as well.
And the students really enjoyed it. They told me that both of these tools were helpful to them because they could use them in their assessment while also showing me what they know. Not only that they understand the vocabulary, but they understand its place in the content and how it connects to everything.
There's been so much support through this program that anytime I have a question, I can reach out. My questions are answered. I have a great network of teachers that are working on it here, so that's been like super beneficial. Yeah, anytime I have a question, I get an answer within 24 hours.
Anytime that one of us might have a question, we could generally solve it amongst ourselves. And if we couldn't, we could bring it to our Director of Learning and Teaching. And if that question needed further clarification, Excel has been extremely responsive and helpful in clarifying.
We as a cohort are meeting like every month in order to ensure there's accountability to push our learning, right? So oftentimes we'll rely on each other to talk about the artifacts we've been collecting, to talk about the things we've learned from our resources.
With my job, there's a lot of paperwork with being a special educator, IEP meetings. There's so much that goes into it that I do like being able to move at my own pace, and when I have time, I can jump in and do it, and it's very easy to work around my schedule.
I'm really excited for what will kind of continue to come in the future. My goal has been to make it through the first set of 6 micro-credentials this year. And then in the next year, we'll move on to kind of the second set of 6, hopefully.
It aids me in my planning, it aids me in my classroom, and I feel like all of the micro-credentials were things that I could use. It was an added experience so that it helped me prepare my lessons better, and I got immediately feedback from my students.
Actually, it's been a lot of fun for me as an educator to try out a lot of the strategies, because this program not only has me focusing on one area at a time, it also gives me a whole toolbox of things to try, like strategies and places to look for lesson plan ideas and how can I tap into the needs of my students.
It's really made me realize, like, wow, I thought I was simplifying directions. I wasn't. As I was reading through it, I was like, man, like, it really made me reflect on myself and realize that I can use this even with my students, because they struggle with some of the same communication pieces, language pieces. There's that learning barrier that they have as well. So it's actually been super useful in terms of my own everyday job as well.
It's a platform that allows for collaboration and community among educators, and there's freedom, in a sense, and flexibility in how you conduct the learning. We schedule our own meetings and times for what work for us.
And you're doing that not in a silo, which I think oftentimes is the downfall of teaching, right? You're always teaching alone, you are always in your own classroom. Excel expands that a little bit, and I'm working with teachers that are not in the same department as me, who are not in the same grade levels as me. And to be able to do that in a small cohort feels like the support I wish all schools had.
So within the school community and the teachers, I feel like now we're developing a working group where we know that this is an interest that we share and that we have our students' best interests at heart, and it's an opportunity to really foster collaboration and to I just feel like it's the very beginning of something that's really powerful.
It's exciting as an educator, I think, to engage in professional learning with your colleagues and then test it out and try it in the moment and see the connections and the impact that it has on the students.
It allows students to really know that they matter, and that this, regardless of what language they speak, that they can achieve their dreams.
As teachers, we need to do what's best for our students, and as teachers, we're inclined to want to provide resources and scaffolds that help every student. Not every class is the same, not every student is the same. So I just view it as another way that we can differentiate and scaffold for all students.
They have the ability to tackle problems from different angles, different perspectives, and also have the empathy and the value of a multicultural world.
The way I see it is students are architects of their future, right? And what we build them up to do in our schools is to give them the tools they need so that they can build the futures that they want. And in many ways, our education systems aren't set up for them to do that sometimes, right? So when I thought about Excel, when I think about supports for MLL students, we're giving them ways to sort of restructure things that work for them, right? In a society that often does not think of MLLs at the center, but rather at the periphery, at the margins, I think it's important for Excel to do the work of recentering students, because the work that we do for them is actually beneficial for everyone in that ecosystem.
I was able to take what I had learned, apply it in the classroom, and see how it affected my students. And what I noticed almost across the board was that it not only helped my students who were multi-language learners, but I was also seeing feedback that the skills that I was learning in this program were also helping my native speakers.
The population of diversity and multi-language learners is growing in the state, so it's projected that we will have more students that would explicitly benefit from these supports. However, it is helpful for all students. What works for one student probably is going to work for another student. So if you're modifying something for a multi-language learner, other learners would also benefit from that scaffold.
I would already recommend it to other school districts. Yes, 100%. For myself, as even an 11th and 12th grade teacher of English literature and composition, the perspective and skills and strategies that I'm practicing and learning more about and applying and reflecting on, they benefit all my students.
There's an expression about windows and mirrors and how students often in places maybe like Barrington, they're looking at a mirror when they're looking at the content. They're reading books in class. They're seeing themselves in the characters, in the scientists, in the other people in their room. But we need to provide more windows for students. If we provide more windows, that's a window into another culture. They're able to view and learn about different cultures that maybe they don't know about to be more globally responsive citizens both in school and beyond Barrington High School.
And that inclusivity really allows for all students, to see that value and be able to have their voices heard. And I think through that process, it adds richness to not only for that student, but really to the entire community that student lives in.
I'd like to think that social change comes in these small networks, right? The most change often comes from localized efforts because that's where you have the most context. You know your students, you know your people. So my hope is that we as a cohort are able to implement this change within our own classrooms and have that spread out, right, towards our communities, towards our cities, and from there to expand out nationwide. Because at the end of the day, all students need the types of support that Excel is sort of guiding us through.
You may be aware or may not be aware that some of the teachers here have joined a team of teachers here to develop themselves professionally to better serve the students who are from multi-language families. Are you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
What do you think of that idea?
That's great. Wait a minute, that's fantastic, because I had no idea. As a Hispanic individual who grew up speaking one language to then having to switch, not too many schools are sensitive about that. They're like, well, this is our curriculum, figure it out. Whereas here it's like, this is our curriculum, but we're gonna help you figure it out. And hearing that, that's, wow.